First off, I'd like to start off by saying Chris Martin is a little rat and a snake, and Coldplay is the worst band in human history.
The only thing worse than catching your spouse cheating is catching them on a stadium jumbotron, with thousands of strangers cheering and millions more watching online. That single awkward moment at a Coldplay concert didn't just humiliate billionaire CEO Andy Byron, it sparked a $50 million lawsuit, a corporate meltdown, and one of the wildest scandals the internet has ever seen. But the real story? It's way darker than anyone realized. Just days after the concert, while memes were still flooding every corner of the internet, Andy Byron made his move, and it shocked everyone. Instead of addressing the rumors or apologizing to his employees, he filed a $50 million lawsuit against Chris Martin. The claim? Defamation, reputational harm, and emotional distress. In other words, Andy was blaming a rock star's joke for the implosion of his personal and professional life. The backlash was immediate. Legal analysts called the lawsuit frivolous and career suicide on national TV. Fans turned Coldplay lyrics into punchlines. "Your Honor, I will try to fix you" trended on Twitter within hours. Even corporate insiders were stunned. One board member, speaking off the record, allegedly told reporters, "This wasn't about protecting the company. This was ego litigation, plain and simple." But the real damage came from the lawsuit itself. Court filings, once private, opened the door to discovery, meaning any alleged texts, emails, or photos between Andy and Kristen could soon become public record. Rumors swirled that Kristen had been quietly documenting everything for months, from late-night Slack messages to expense reports that aligned with supposed romantic getaways. As one insider put it bluntly, if she talks, it's game over. Instead of putting the scandal to rest, Andy's lawsuit poured gasoline on the fire. Coldplay fans rallied behind Chris Martin, turning him into an unlikely folk hero. Ticket sales spiked. Merch with the phrase, "We're just very shy," sold out at concerts. And Andy Byron? He wasn't just fighting a rock star in court, he was fighting the entire internet. It all began on a warm summer night at Fenway Park. Coldplay was halfway through their set, confetti raining down, lights pulsing over a sold-out crowd. Fans were singing along, phones in the air, and then the jumbotron lit up. It was kiss cam time. But instead of a cute couple sharing an awkward laugh, the camera froze on two people who instantly went pale. The man was Andy Byron, billionaire CEO of the rising tech giant Astronomer. The woman? Kristen Kitt, the company's head of HR. There was just one problem. Neither of them were married to each other. Witnesses say their reaction was instant and unmistakable. Kristen looked away, Andy stiffened, and the crowd sensed something was off. Seconds later, Chris Martin glanced at the screen and without missing a beat joked into the mic, either they're having an affair or they're just very shy. The stadium erupted in laughter. But for Andy Byron, it was the moment everything fell apart. What no one realized that night was how much history existed between Andy and Kristen. Rumors had swirled quietly inside Astronomer for months. Whispered office gossip, matching travel dates and late-night Slack messages that never quite added up. But the viral kiss cam clip didn't just confirm suspicions, it detonated them. Within minutes, clips were flooding TikTok, memes were spreading on Twitter, and hashtags like #ColdplayAffair and #HRDrama were trending worldwide. And while fans laughed at the awkwardness, Andy Byron wasn't laughing. Because in a matter of hours, his billion-dollar reputation wasn't just dented, it was destroyed. Inside Astronomer's headquarters, chaos hit almost instantly. Employees who had been in awe of Andy Byron hours earlier were now circulating memes of their CEO on Slack. Screenshots of the kiss cam moment were plastered everywhere, with captions like, "Mandatory HR training just got interesting," and "Guess we finally found out what it takes to get FaceTime with the boss." By sunrise, the company's internal culture, once polished and tight-lipped, was in open revolt. Executives scrambled to contain the situation. Sources say multiple emergency calls were made overnight, with board members demanding answers about the woman next to Andy. Kristen Kitt, once hailed as the company's ethical backbone, had suddenly become the center of an investigation. Her LinkedIn vanished, her Instagram was wiped clean. Coworkers whispered about alleged messages and travel expenses that didn't line up. It wasn't just gossip anymore, it was an HR nightmare unfolding in real time. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Just 2 weeks earlier, Andy had given a magazine interview about corporate accountability, saying leaders at Astronomer were held to the highest standards of conduct. Now, that same leader was the face of one of the messiest corporate scandals in tech history. And as the clip racked up millions of views, the pressure on Andy and Kristen grew unbearable. But this wasn't just a viral embarrassment, it was about to turn into a legal war. Because while most people expected an apology or a quiet resignation, Andy Byron was preparing for something no one saw coming. But what no one knew yet was that Kristen Kitt was about to make her own move, and it would make Andy's legal nightmare even worse. While Andy was busy waging war against Chris Martin, Kristen Kitt was quietly disappearing, at least on the surface. Her social media accounts were wiped, her LinkedIn gone, no public statements, no interviews, nothing. But behind the silence, insiders claimed she was preparing something far more dangerous: leverage. Rumors spread through tech circles that Kristen had receipts, not just texts, but emails, internal memos, and even expense reports tying Andy to questionable trips and late-night meetings. One alleged leak, circulating on private forums, claimed Kristen once messaged Andy, "You told me no one would ever know. Now everyone knows." Another supposed screenshot showed calendar invites labeled innocuously as client dinners, but scheduled in the same cities where Coldplay happened to be touring. Whether real or fabricated, these whispers fueled the internet's obsession. What made things even worse for Andy was that Kristen wasn't rushing to defend herself. She was waiting. Insiders said she felt thrown under the bus when Andy framed her as the scandal's initiator during internal meetings. One former colleague put it bluntly: he tried to save himself by sacrificing her, and she's not going down alone. Meanwhile, Astronomer's board was reaching its breaking point. Investors were furious about the lawsuit and even more alarmed about the whispers of a second scandal, one that could involve multiple executives looking the other way. The phrase toxic culture started appearing in press coverage. What began as a viral kiss cam moment had mutated into a corporate credibility crisis. And Kristen? According to those close to her, she wasn't bluffing. She allegedly told friends she kept everything: Slack logs, hotel confirmations, private jokes that suddenly looked incriminating in hindsight. And if Andy thought suing Chris Martin was risky, what Kristen was about to do next would turn his entire empire upside down. As Kristen's silence grew more ominous, Andy Byron's world began collapsing from the inside out. Astronomer's board, once fiercely protective of its visionary CEO, was now holding emergency meetings without him. Multiple insiders claim investors demanded answers, not about the concert joke, but about the judgment calls that followed. Why was Andy suing a rock star? Why was he dragging the company into a personal scandal? And most damning of all, what else might Kristen Kitt have on him? Leaks from inside these meetings painted a grim picture. One alleged email, widely circulated among employees, reportedly read, "The trust is gone. We cannot risk further exposure." By now, ethics committees had joined the fray, combing through company records for anything that hinted at misconduct. Whispers spread of overlapping travel expenses, suspicious hotel bookings, and meetings scheduled in cities that just happened to coincide with Coldplay tour dates. Every detail was under scrutiny. Public opinion turned brutal. Late-night hosts mocked Andy relentlessly. Headlines dubbed him the CEO who sued a song. Hashtags like Shygate and Fix You lawsuit trended for days. Even corporate allies distanced themselves, quietly pausing partnerships and sponsorships with Astronomer. For a man once considered untouchable in Silicon Valley, Andy Byron was suddenly radioactive. The pressure was crushing, and insiders say Andy began isolating himself. No public appearances, no statements, just silence. Except for the occasional leak suggesting he was lashing out behind closed doors. One source alleged he demanded legal action not just against Chris Martin, but also Coldplay's management, the event organizer, and even the camera operator. It was a scorched earth strategy, and it was failing spectacularly. Because while Andy spiraled, Kristen Kitt's rumored receipts hung over the entire company like a sword. Everyone knew she had something. The only question was, when or if she'd use it. And that uncertainty was enough to paralyze an empire. While Andy Byron scrambled to contain the fallout, Kristen Kitt was quietly plotting her own move, and when it finally hit, it hit like a bomb. Overnight, screenshots began circulating on anonymous forums and private group chats. Alleged messages between Andy and Kristen surfaced, dripping with personal jokes and travel plans disguised as business meetings. One viral post showed what appeared to be an email from Andy reading, "Fenway will be the first night we can finally stop pretending." Whether real or fabricated, the internet didn't care. The story exploded. Legal analysts warned that if even half of these leaks were authentic, Andy's lawsuit against Chris Martin was doomed. Discovery could expose not just Andy's private life, but astronomers' entire leadership structure. And according to multiple insiders, Kristen knew it. One former colleague allegedly overheard her saying, "If they burn me, I burn them." It was a threat no one doubted she could make good on. The leaks also triggered a massive shift in public opinion. Up until now, Kristen had been framed as the other woman in Andy's scandal. But as alleged evidence hinted at months of internal cover-ups and board-level awareness, the narrative flipped. Suddenly, Kristen wasn't the villain. She was the whistleblower. Meanwhile, Chris Martin remained silent, letting the chaos play out without a single comment. Fans turned him into an unlikely cult hero, waving signs that read, "We're just very shy," at Coldplay shows. Merch sold out, ticket sales soared. The lawsuit meant to bury him had instead revived his cultural relevance. Inside Astronomer, however, things were at a breaking point. Multiple sources claimed the board was preparing contingency plans to remove Andy. Investors were pulling out. Employees described the office as hostile, paranoid, and unrecognizable. And through it all, Kristen Kitt stayed quiet, but not invisible. Every rumor, every leak, every whisper only increased the sense that she was sitting on the most dangerous file in tech. And according to one insider, she was about to use it. By the time fall rolled around, Andy Byron was no longer the tech world's golden boy. He was its cautionary tale. Multiple sources confirmed Astronomer's board had convened an emergency vote, and the result was almost unanimous. Andy had to go. Investors were livid, clients were fleeing, and the company's valuation had cratered under the weight of the scandal. One leak allegedly quoted a board member saying, "This isn't about damage control anymore. This is about survival." Behind closed doors, Andy reportedly fought tooth and nail to keep his position. He blamed Kristen, the media, even Chris Martin's fans, anyone but himself. But insiders say the final blow came when Kristen's alleged receipts were quietly reviewed by the board. According to one person with direct knowledge, the evidence was worse than anyone imagined. Not just personal messages, but documents suggesting misuse of company funds and potential conflicts of interest. If those leaks ever went public, it wouldn't just ruin Andy, it could sink Astronomer entirely. And then, almost overnight, it was over. The lawsuit against Chris Martin was quietly dropped. No statements, no explanation, just silence. Days later, Andy Byron stepped down as CEO, citing a desire to focus on his family. But the whispers told a different story. A forced resignation, a severance package slashed to avoid litigation, and a non-disclosure agreement thicker than a novel. Kristen Kitt, meanwhile, walked away from Astronomer entirely. Rumors swirled she'd secured a payout in exchange for her silence, though some insisted she never signed anything. Her social media remains scrubbed to this day, fueling speculation that she's saving everything for the right moment. A book deal, a podcast, a tell-all interview, the possibilities hang over the scandal like a ticking clock. And Chris Martin? He never addressed it. He didn't need to. At every Coldplay show since, fans still hold up signs that say, "We're just very shy," turning the most humiliating night of Andy Byron's life into an inside joke that refuses to die. But here's the part that keeps people talking. No one outside that boardroom knows exactly what Kristen had. The texts, the emails, the receipts, they've never been leaked in full. And until they are, the scandal isn't truly over. It's just waiting for the next spark.